Good day, everybody. I'm Jonathan from Boredom Sated, and today I've got another kind of fun multi-class build for 5th edition. This is going to kind of mix some of the character classes I've already used, but this is a really fun build, and by fun I do mean it is still quite strong and overpowered. As per usual, I've got a 20th level build going here. If you wanted to build it on your own, there's multiple ways to be able to do it. And I will go over at least the beginning levels to make it easier to figure out the best way to go. So this build is a Warlock. Main build is a Warlock going into Bard and Paladin. This is a Hexblade build, but this is going to make it so you can do some really fun stuff. And the main concept of this is a Hexblade build that will allow you to dual wield and still be able to get all of your other fun stuff off. So let's start with the basic rules for the Hexblade that we're going to be using here. So obviously, first things first, you would be choosing Hexblade as your otherworldly patron. We will also be going with the Pact of the Blade. There is a reason why we need both. Obviously, most of the Eldritch invocations require you to have Pact of the Blade to be able to get all of the good stuff, but there's actually another reason, and this is a real fun one. So, to make sure we get this correct, let me read to you how this works. So, for anybody who doesn't know what Hexblade is, Hexblade is a very powerful, probably the most single-built, random, like the way they did 5th edition. This is the character class they decided, this is going to be overpowered, and we don't care. So building a Hexblade in general is very, very powerful. I probably would not allow any player I was ever running a game for play a Hexblade just based on principle. But let me go over the basics of the Hexblade. First of all, they get shield as a base spell, which is obviously great because having the extra AC is wonderful. Hexblade's Curse is a huge ability. As a bonus action, you can choose one creature within 30 feet of you. The target is cursed for 1 minute. The curse ends if the target dies, you die, or you are incapacitated. Until the curse ends, you gain the following benefits. You gain bonus to damage rolls against the target equal to your proficiency bonus. Any attack roll you make against the cursed target is a crit on a 19 or 20 instead of just a 20. If the cursed target dies, you regain hit points equal to your Warlock level plus your Charisma modifier. You can use this feature again after a short rest. So that's quite nice. Hex Warrior. This is where things come into play. At first level, you acquire the necessary training to effectively arm yourself for battle. You gain proficiency with medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. The influence of your patient also allows you to mystically channel your will through a particular weapon. When you finish a long rest, you can touch one weapon that you are proficient with that lacks the two-handed property. When you attack with that weapon, you can use your Charisma modifier instead of Strength or Dex for the attack and damage rolls. This benefit lasts until you finish a long rest. If you later gain the Pact of the Blade feature, the benefit extends to every Pact weapon you conjure with that feature, no matter the weapon's type. Now, here's where the technical part comes in. Hex Warrior and Pact of the Blade, and I will read Pact of the Blade in a minute, do technically stack. You can make a Hex Warrior blade that uses your Charisma modifier, and your Pact of the Blade weapon can use your Charisma modifier. What this means is you can dual wield and have Charisma be your to hit and damage for both weapons, especially if you can find a way to make it so your offhand does damage, which we will do, which is part of the rest of the build. So because of this, your Pact Blade can be your main hand weapon, your Hex Warrior Blade can be your off weapon, and both weapons will use Charisma to hit and damage. To continue going, we get Accursed Spectre. Whenever you slay a humanoid, you can cause its spirit to rise from its corpse. When the specter appears, it gains temporary hit points equal to half your Warlock level. Roll initiative. When it turns, it gets some fun stuff. It gains a special bonus to attack rolls equal to your Charisma modifier. It's a fun little thing. Armor of Hexes. At 10th level, your Hex grows more powerful. If the target's cursed by your Hexblade hits you with an attack roll, you can use your reaction to roll a d6. On a 4 or higher, it misses you, so you got a 50-50 shot of getting missed. Very cool, very useful. Hexblade, very, very powerful. So, let's go into that whole Pact of the Blade ability. So you can use your action to create a pact weapon in your empty hand. You can choose the form that this melee weapon takes each time you create it. You are proficient with it while you wield it. The weapon counts as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistances and immunities to non-magical attacks and damage. Your weapon disappears if it's more than 5 feet away from you for 1 more minute or more. It also disappears if you use this feature again. You can also dismiss the weapon, no action required, and of course it goes away if you die. You can make a magic weapon to your pact weapon by doing a ritual. You can dismiss the weapon, blah, 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 blah. So, again, the main purpose of this is that because of the way Pact of the Blade works and Hex magic works, we can have 2 swords that use your charisma modifier to hit and damage. Continuing in our Warlock abilities, the main other thing that most people we would want to go over with that is going to be your Eldritch invocations. There's a bunch of invocations that are obviously incredibly helpful. First off is going to be improved Pact weapon, because it's always good to have that +1 to hit and damage. Having a magical weapon is always nice. This is not necessarily completely necessary, but if, again, we're working with the idea that we're not going to be using magical weapons for the most part, having the +1 to hit and damage is very nice. One of the most important features of this is going to be, of course, getting to 5th level, and so one of the most important features of this is going to be getting that second attack, Thirsting Blade, which gives you your second attack. Now, technically, because of the way we're going to be going into this, if you wanted to do it a slightly different way, you wouldn't need to take Thirsting Blade, which is kind of nice because it would open up another 5th level slot to you. Because we are doing the Hex Warrior, you can go with the Hex the invocations. Relentless Hex is a lot of fun, which allows you to, as a bonus action, teleport up to 30 feet up to an unoccupied space next to your target. However, for our purposes, we're hoping that our target isn't trying to run away in the first place. Another one of the main reasons why we are going 12 levels into Warlock for this build is for Life Drinker, which allows you to add your charisma modifier damage as necrotic damage to your packed weapon a second time. So because we're using charisma to hit and damage already, our packed blade will also be able to do charisma a second time. Because our packed blade specifically will get to use it a second time, it's going to be our main hand weapon while we're dual wielding. But again, that's going to be a little bit up to you for how we do the build. I'll explain a little bit more about that as we get into our second class. Other useful ones that at least I like, well, obviously one other one we're definitely going to be taking is Eldritch Smite, because this build will be definitely using a big smite build. And once per turn, when you hit a creature with your packed weapon, you can expend a Warlock spell slot to deal an extra d8 force damage to the target, plus an additional d8 per level of the spell. Now, you can only use Eldritch Smite with your Warlock spells, which means you only get 2 of them per short rest, but that's still going to be pretty strong, because if you do it at max level, each one of the Eldritch Smites is going to add 6d8 force damage to your attack. Don't worry, once everything is put together, I'll go over what all of the damage is going to look like and what all of the things you can do are going to be. So we're looking at 12 levels in Warlock. I've talked about the whole dual wielding thing, and we're going to talk about what kind of weapons we're going to dual wield with and all of that in a minute. The best part about this entire build is that you really need charisma and just charisma to be a very high stat, which is fantastic because it makes it so much easier for you to be able to get all of these builds done and multi-class, because you don't need as many stat boosts. You just need your charisma to 20, And there's one feat that we want to take to make life much, much easier, which is going to be the dual wielding feat, which allows us to not only get +1 to our armor class, but also it allows us to use larger than light weapons in each of our hands. The reason why we want to use larger than light weapons, we want to use one-handed weapons, is because it's going to be nice and clean to be able to just use a D8 for everything. So having like dual wielding long swords just seems like a fun thing to do, and it would look cool if you actually made a picture for it. So after Warlock, the next thing that we're going to take a look at is Bard. You guys can probably take a guess based on previous videos that I'm going to be going College of Swords. Now, why are we doing this? First of all, Bard is charisma based, which means that you get a bunch of extra spell slots to be able to play around with your Warlock spells because of that. Two, because it's charisma based, again, we only need the one main spell, main stat, which is fantastic. And three, we can go into College of Swords, which is going to give us some other bonuses that's going to work really well for that whole dual wielding thing. Also, because we are strictly a charisma class, remember that the number of Bardic Inspiration dice we get is our charisma modifier. So everything's based on charisma. So as a bard, you probably already know most of the things I'm going to say if you've watched any of these videos, but as a bard, main thing we're going to get is we're going to get full spell casting. So we will get up to 3rd level spells because we are going to go 6 levels into Bard. So we've got 6 levels of spell casting, so 3rd level spell slots. We have Bardic Inspiration. Because we're going 6 levels in Bard, we will get D8s for our Bardic Inspiration die. We do get Expertise, so we've got a couple of extra skills that we get double proficiency in. Multi-classing into Bard also does get us an extra skill slot, which is great. Jack of all trades makes it so all of our skills that don't have proficiency get half proficiency. So going in Bard just always makes a skill, like your character that doesn't have a lot of skills, that much better. And if you do have skills, Expertise makes it that much better. Now, College of Swords gets you your fighting style, which we're going to be going 2-weapon fighting for this purpose. When you engage in 2-weapon fighting, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of the second attack. So now we're looking at charisma modifier to hit and damage for both of our weapons. Before, our offhand weapon couldn't use our charisma modifier because of that. And the other thing, of course, is Blade Flourish. I love Blade Flourish. When you take the attack action on your turn, your walking speed increases by 10 feet until the end of your turn, and if a weapon attack that you made as a part of this action hits a creature, you can use one of the following Blade Flourish options of your choice. The one that I like by far the most is Defensive Flourish, but all 3 are decent. Defensive Flourish allows you to expend your Bardic Inspiration die to deal extra damage to the target, equal to the roll on the Bardic Inspiration die, and you also add that number you rolled to your AC until the start of your next turn. So, with this whole thing, we can use medium armor, we can get +1 AC from our, we're going to get +1 AC from our feat. We can now also use Defensive Flourish to be able to increase our AC, and we still have the ability to cast Shield, and because it was a Warlock spell, we can use that spell list as part of our spells that we cast using our Bard spells as well, because of the way sharing spell slots works. So we have a lot of really fun abilities here, and our AC has now gone through the roof. Because if necessary, we add a D8 +5 to our armor class, plus medium armor, plus the 1 AC, and so now we're getting ourselves up to having up to possibly a high value of maybe 30, if we get lucky for an AC value, which is just fantastic. So the other thing here is if you wanted to wait in Bard, you're going to get it, because we're going 6 levels into Bard, we will get a second attack in Bard that way as well. So if you wanted to not take the blade, to get the second attack as your invocation, if you wanted to take something else, technically you could, because we're getting our second attack from another source. So that also gives us more versatility in our Eldritch invocations, which is a very cool ability. So we've got our dual wielding going on. We've got our extra damage based on charisma going to be going on. We've got our defensive flourish, which is adding a bardic inspiration die to damage and to armor class. We've got Eldritch invocation. How can we make this that much better? Add 2 levels of paladin. 2 levels of paladin is going to get us a couple of things. First of all, it's going to get us a fighting style. Fighting style here can be, because we're going to be we've got a couple of options for fighting style. We can go defense to just give us a +1 to AC. We can go with... We can't go with dueling. We can go with a couple of other ones, but I mean, probably for the will build that I would be doing, I would go defense just because I like to not get hit. But you can go several other ways if you want to for your fighting style here. But because we are wielding with 2 weapons, we can't use dueling. So that is one of the weaknesses to that. So our second thing that we're getting from this, of course, is Divine Smite. The reason why we only need 2 levels in Paladin is because of the way multi-classing works. Divine Smite can use any spell slot to be working, not just Paladin-based ones. So our spell slot for this would be up to a 4th level spell slot based on what we have from Bard and Paladin. Or if we really wanted to, we could use a Warlock spell slot, but I sincerely doubt we would do that. The main thing that we need to remember here is that our Divine Smite and our Eldritch Smite are completely allowed to stack, because all of them are based on when you hit. Now, to multi-class into Paladin, we also need Charisma, but we do need a Strength of 13. So a Strength of 13 is our only other absolute must here to be able to do this, but that's really not that hard to get, especially if you go with some of the possible race combinations. One of the race combinations that I would be talking about, but we'll get to that in a minute. So from Paladin, we've got Divine Smite, we have a fighting style, we have Divine Sense, Lay on Hands. We count as a half level for each level of Paladin towards our spell slots, which is the reason why we count as a 7th level caster for the purposes of our regular casting. We count as a 12th level caster for our Warlock abilities for casting. So we've got a bunch of things that we can do with that. We do have 3 spell slots as our Warlock build here, which is, again, quite nice. Spell slot maximum level is 5. So last thing that we need to talk about, and before we get into the damage of the build, is going to be what race we take. Now, for the purposes of going with the maximizing out your damage build, what I would probably say is go with an Aasimar. Aasimars start as +2 Charisma, which is great. It starts with your Charisma probably being at minimum of 17, which gets you where you want to get faster than basically any other race. You've got Dark Vision, you've got resistance to necrotic and radiant damage, you can heal someone equal to your hit level once per long rest. You know the light cantrip, Charisma is your spellcasting modifier, and the main reason why is because you get an ability, depending on which subrace you go with, of Radiant Soul or Necrotic Shroud or Radiant Consumption. They all have one of they all do one thing the same, which is the main purpose of this, which is that once per on each of your turns, you may deal extra radiant damage for 2 of them. It's necrotic damage for the 3rd one, equal to your level. So obviously that's a lot of damage. So we can add a lot of damage in for a single attack. And I will put that in for everything once I do give you guys a calculation as to what we're going to be getting as our maximum damage here. Now, it does take an action to activate each of these abilities. Depending on which subrace you go with, there's some other things that come along with it. The easiest one to do is probably the Radiant Soul, which is the Protector Aasimar that gets you a Wisdom modifier. The one that I would probably suggest is Fallen Aasimar, which is the necrotic one. Your strength score increases by 1, which means you only needed 12 strength base to get there instead of a 13. So that does make it easier to get our bonuses in there. Now, the Necrotic Shroud is something that you want to make sure you're careful with, which is, starting at 3rd level, you can use your action to unleash the divine energy within yourself, causing your eyes to turn into pools of darkness and 2 skeletal, ghostly, flightless wings to sprout from your back. You transform. Other creatures within 10 feet have to make a charisma saving throw or become frightened of you until the end of your next turn. So you could affect your allies with this, which is the main reason why you want to make sure that you're careful when using it. Your transformation lasts for 1 minute until you end it as a bonus action, during which on once of your turns you can deal extra necrotic damage to one target when you deal damage with an attack or spell. The extra damage is equal to your level. So, at maximum level, obviously, this is a plus 20 to damage. Now, if you are not allowed to use other books for your races, the other one that I would probably suggest would just be going with Tiefling. Tiefling gets you the same charisma modifier, so you don't have to worry about that. It still gets you dark vision, it gets you resistance to fire, and getting a one-time use of Hellish Rebuke doesn't suck. It also gets you a one-time use of darkness once you get high enough level, and that can also be helpful to you depending on how you want to do your build. So, assuming that we're going Aasimar and all of that stuff, and assuming all of our other abilities are going to be working together, let's talk about some damage. So, we're going to be using a pair of long swords, just because it's easy to work with. They're D8s. Assuming that you hit with your Pact Blade feature, assuming that everything is going correctly, your first Pact Blade feature, you've got a +1 weapon guaranteed. You get to add your charisma modifier to damage. You get to add your charisma modifier to damage a second time because of the fact that we are going to be using Life Drinker. So we've got charisma modifier damage twice. Because we're probably going to be Hexblade cursing this character, we're going to add our... So, we have 5 from Charisma, 5 additional from Charisma. This, remember, only works with your Pact of the Blade feature. 6 more because of your Hex target getting used to 16, plus 1 for your basic actual weapon damage. Now, we've hit. We can use Eldritch... Smite to add an additional 6d8 damage there. We can use Divine Smite as our max level spell slot to add 5d8 damage, because it's 1 plus an additional 1d8, or 2d8 plus an additional 1 for the level of spell used. So that's 12d8 right there. Then we can add another d8 to your damage from College of Swords, which will also add that same d8 to our armor class. So we're up to 12d8 damage, 13d8 damage, plus charisma, plus 1, plus our proficiency modifier. And if we have activated our Necrotic Soul, Radiant Soul, whichever one, that would also add our level to damage. So we're looking at 5 plus 5 plus 6 plus 1 plus a possible 20. So we're looking at a possible damage of 13d8 plus 37. And remember, you're critting on a 19 to 20. You can wait until you attempt to crit for any of these. And if you do get that 19 to 20 crit range going, then you can maximize all of these things out and get yourself 26d8. Oh, actually, that's not true. 25d8 damage plus 37. The reason why it's not true is because the College of Swords Bard's additional damage specifically says you add the damage equal to the die roll, not the other way around. You do not increase it with a critical. And the reason why is because otherwise you would double the amount you gained from your AC from the critical, and that would be overpowered. Because you could get a possible plus 16 to your armor class that way, and that's not fair. So, Remember, that's one attack. You can do, because of the way that we're doing this dual wielding thing, we're planning on taking 3 attacks in a round. Now, you cannot add your charisma modifier a second time to your damage with the offhand weapon, because we cannot use the Pact of the Blade feature bonuses with our offhand. So our offhand is going to do less damage. We can also only do the Eldritch invocation or the Eldritch smite, and we can also only do our Paladin smite once per round. The Warlock smite you can only do once per round. Divine smite actually does not have that feature, so you can use it every attack that you hit within the round, which is kind of nice. The Bard feature you can also only use once per round, so you can only add the extra d8 there once per round. And I believe the Hexblade's curse... Oh no, the Hexblade's curse damage works all the time as well. So, your one main attack, if you hit with it, 13d8 plus... it can maximize out at 13d8 plus 37. Your second attack can do a lot less, but where we can... Let's just say that we're not going to use another smite, just to say so. So that second attack is going to hit for a d8 plus 17, which is still quite a lot. And your third attack, you still are going to get the bonus damage from the Hexblade's curse, but you're not going to get the second charisma modifier damage. So your offhand weapon, we don't know if that's also magical or not, is going to be doing a d8 plus 11, d8 plus 12, depending on whether it's magical. So the idea here is that we're still getting 3 attacks. We're doing all of this amount of damage. Let's say that we do hit with all 3 of these attacks. All 3 of the numbers combined is going to get us to 15d8 plus 65, 66, depending on magical weapon. 15d8 is a lot of dice. If we want to go with the average for 15d8, we're looking at approximately 68 more points of damage. So per round, although we can only do it 3 times, we can hit for up to, per round, 130 damage, 125 points of damage. That's a lot of damage. That's a lot of work. Your AC is going to be very high. Your abilities are very ridiculous, and everything is based on charisma, which is, of course, the reason why, as I've said, the Hexblade is very, very, very overpowered. There's lots of other ways to be able to do the Hexblade and make it overpowered. You can also do Sorcerer. We've talked about this in the past, so I'm not going to go into it. So that's generally everything for this build. If you've got any questions or issues, obviously feel free to ask. And tell me if you liked the build. Tell me if you didn't like the build. Like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of fun stuff. Over 90% of our views are from people who are not subscribed, so please subscribe to make it so we can eventually monetize this and make it sound better, look better, all of that other fun stuff. So that's me from Boredom Sated. I hope you guys had fun, and I will see you next time.